heart of Africa, a great river winds its way northward, carving a path of life through harsh desert lands. This is the Nile, a river so vital and revered that for thousands of years it has been more than just a waterway. It has been the lifeblood of a civilization and a dwelling place of gods. To the ancient Egyptians, the Nile was everything. Its annual flood brought rich black silt from the African highlands, transforming the barren desert into fertile farmland. This miracle of nature formed the foundation of their entire way of life. But the Nile was more than just the source of their food and prosperity. In the eyes of the Egyptians, it was a living entity, a god in its own right. They called this god Hapi, depicting him as a rotund man with the breasts of a woman, symbolizing the Nile's nurturing abundance. Hapi was the bringer of the flood, the one who ensured the land would bear fruit. In hymns and prayers, the Egyptians would beseech Hapi for a good inundation, neither too high to cause destruction, nor too low to result in famine. But Hapi was just one of many deities associated with the great river. Perhaps the most important was Ra, the sun god, who made his daily journey across the sky in a celestial boat. Each night, Ra would descend into the underworld, navigating the dark waters of the Nile that flowed beneath the earth. This nightly journey was fraught with danger as Ra battled against Apophis, the serpent of chaos who sought to devour him and plunge the world into eternal darkness. As Ra emerged victorious each morning, reborn with the dawn, so too did the Egyptians see the promise of rebirth in the waters of the Nile. This concept was deeply intertwined with the myth of Osiris, god of the dead and lord of the underworld. According to legend, Osiris was murdered by his jealous brother Set, who dismembered his body and scattered the pieces across Egypt. Isis, Osiris's wife, gathered the pieces and, with her magical powers, resurrected him long enough to conceive their son, Horus. This cycle of death and rebirth was mirrored in the annual flooding of the Nile. As the waters receded, they left behind fertile soil from which new life would spring, a physical manifestation of Osiris's resurrection. The Egyptians saw their own hopes for eternal life reflected in this endless cycle, believing that just as Osiris rose again, so too could they achieve immortality through proper burial rites and magical spells. The Nile played a crucial role in these funerary practices. The river was seen as a conduit to the afterlife, and many tombs were built on its western bank, where the sun set each day. The dead were thought to travel along the Nile to reach the Field of Reeds, a paradisiacal afterlife that mirrored the fertile Nile Valley. Before a pharaoh could make this final journey, however, his body had to be purified in the sacred waters of the Nile. Elaborate ceremonies were held on the riverbank, where priests would wash the pharaoh's body with Nile water, symbolically cleansing him of earthly impurities and preparing him for his transformation into a god. But it wasn't just in death that the Nile's waters held power. The river was integral to daily life and worship. Temples were often built close to the water's edge, and many religious festivals involved processions along the river. Priests would measure the height of the annual flood using structures called nilometers, seeing in the water levels omens of the year to come. The creatures of the Nile were also revered and feared in equal measure. The crocodile, that fearsome predator, was worshipped as the god Sobek, lord of the waters and protector of the pharaoh. The hippopotamus, despite its destructive potential, was associated with the goddess Taweret, a protective deity invoked by pregnant women and new mothers. Even the lowly Nile perch had its place in Egyptian mythology. When Ra's boat was threatened by Apophis, it was said that the Nile perch would transform into a deadly weapon, leaping from the water to attack the chaos serpent and ensure the sun's safe passage. As centuries passed and empires rose and fell, the Nile remained a constant, continuing to shape the land and people of Egypt. Today, the river still plays a vital role in modern Egyptian life, though the ancient gods are no longer worshipped and the old rituals have long since faded into history. Yet, in many ways, the spirit of the ancient Egyptians' reverence for the Nile lives on. The river continues to be the country's lifeline, providing water for irrigation, transportation, and hydroelectric power. Its banks are still home to millions of Egyptians who depend on its waters just as their ancestors did thousands of years ago. The Nile faces new challenges in the modern era. Pollution, climate change, and disputes over water rights threaten its future. But for many Egyptians, the river remains a source of national pride and identity, a link to their ancient past and a symbol of their enduring civilization. As the sun sets over the Nile Delta, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, one can almost imagine the solar bark of Ra beginning its nightly journey through the underworld. The lapping of waves against the shore might be the whisper of ancient spirits, and in the cry of a night bird, perhaps the voice of Isis can be heard, eternally searching for her lost love along the river's banks. For in Egypt, the Nile is more than just a river. It is a living story, a tale of gods and pharaohs, of life, death, and rebirth. It is the river of spirits, its sacred waters flowing not just through the land, but through time itself, carrying with them the dreams and memories of countless generations.